Months after his field season, Alexander Reeves was summoned to a meeting in his supervisor's office. He didn't know why.
Come in, Reeves. Take a seat. We need to talk. There have been others, Reeves. 3 other geologists reported the same phenomenon in that exact quadrangle, 1968, 1973, and 1982. They were all reassigned.
This has happened before? Why wasn't I warned?
There's a sealed file. It remains sealed. The agency's policy is clear. No investigation. There's a desk position in Reston. I am recommending you for it. You'll transition immediately.
So this is how it ends. 6 years of fieldwork, and they're burying it.
But the story had started 8 months earlier. With a standard mapping deployment to the Brooks Range, Alexander was dropped into a remote alpine basin with a tent, a rock hammer, and a USGS field case. He began collecting rock samples, labeling each by GPS, coordinate, and stratum, storing them in the hard-shell case. It was routine, until it wasn't. Each morning, before the sun crested the peaks, Alexander plotted his route on the quadrangle map, then shouldered his sample bag and started the long hike across the scree.
Lisburn limestone should be cropping out along this ridge. If I'm lucky, there's a good exposure of the Nanushuk Formation further up.
He hammered chunks from the outcrop with practiced swings, each metallic ring bouncing off the mountains and fading into the emptiness. He marked every rock with its GPS coordinates, formation name, and collection date, then slipped it into his sample bag. When he returned to camp in the fading light, he transferred each rock into the field case, exactly in the order he'd collected them. The hard shell case sat at the foot of his cot, its lid clamped shut against the biting cold that seeped into the tent each night.
Another solid day. The stratigraphic column is starting to make sense. Maybe I'll finish ahead of schedule.
The silence out here wasn't just quiet. It was a physical weight. Wind, the occasional rockfall, and the sound of his own breath. That was it. He didn't mind the solitude. In fact, after a week, he'd come to prefer it. For 6 straight days, the routine held. Map, collect, label, store. No deviation, no hint of what was coming. On the morning of the 7th day, Alexander unlatched the field case and felt a faint, irrational prickle at the back of his neck.
That sample was on the right, wasn't it? No? I'm tired. They're exactly where I left them.
He closed the case firmly and shook off the thought. A long week alone could make anyone's memory play tricks, but the next morning, as he scanned the contents of the case, the feeling returned. This time, the shift seemed unmistakable.
2 samples have swapped positions. I am sure of it. But how? The case was closed all night.
He stepped outside and checked the perimeter. Only his own tracks, decaying in the frost. Nothing else moved. The only explanation he could grasp was that he'd misremembered. Twice, it was the only rational answer. That evening, he did something he'd never done before. He photographed the open case, capturing the exact position of every labeled rock.
If there's a change, I'll have proof. If there isn't, well, then this is just a precaution.
He closed the case, latches with a definitive click, the camera on his cot. And outside, the mountains watched in silence. At first light, Alexander unlatched the case and raised the camera again, his hands steadier than his heart. He brought up the 2 images side by side on the LCD screen, comparing rock labels and positions with a sinking certainty.
They've moved. Not 1 or 2. Half the case has rearranged itself.
He threw on his jacket and stumbled outside, circling the tent. The frost was pristine. No footprints, no disturbed gravel. Back inside, he cataloged the changes more carefully, noting which rocks had shifted and how.
No one could have entered without leaving a trace. This isn't a prank. This isn't human.
He decided then. Every night, before sleep, a photograph. Every morning, before coffee, another. Data would replace fear.
I'll document everything. If there's a pattern, I'll find it. If it's random, I'll deal with that too.
That night, he set the camera on a tripod, framed the case and began a log that would become an obsession. The case sat closed in the dark, its latches untouched. But when he looked at it, he felt like something was already waiting. At dawn, the camera's memory card held 64 identical frames of blackness. The field case was open, and the rocks were in a new order.
Nothing moves in these frames. It's like the change happens in the blink between shots.
He added lantern light and set the interval to 2 minutes. The result was identical. Still emptiness, then a rearranged case at dawn.
Either the camera is lying, or the reordering isn't a process. It's an event, instantaneous.
By the third night, his log held 12 dusk photos and 12 dawn photos. The hours between were a void.
It's not just the rocks. The dark itself refuses to be observed.
He slept with the headlamp aimed at the case, yet woke to the same silent rearrangement.
I am chasing something that doesn't want to be seen.
Frustration hardened into routine. He would keep photographing, keep logging, in hope the pattern revealed itself. But the pattern, if it existed, remained a cipher, just rocks rearranging, night after night. On the 5th morning, after another silent rearrangement, Alexander pulled out a permanent marker.
If the rocks are being swapped, the marks will move. If they stay, the rocks themselves are being reordered.
He turned over each rock and wrote R on the underside, careful not to obscure the existing labels or geologic details. He photographed the marked rocks in their collection order, then closed the case and went to sleep. The morning photograph showed the rocks in yet another unfamiliar layout, but the white AR marks were unmistakable. He zoomed in on the image, tracing each initial from rock to rock. They hadn't moved. The rocks had.
The rocks haven't been swapped. They've been moved. The same rocks, just in a different order.
He printed both photos and circled the initials with a pencil, matching each marked rock between the two images. The implication was staggering. Something was physically handling the rocks each night.
There's no rational explanation. Nothing that belongs in a field report.
That night, Alexander decided he would not sleep. He would witness the reordering firsthand. He positioned the case in the center of the tent, sat upright on a stool, and fixed his headlamp on the latches.
I'll watch until dawn. Whatever is doing this, I'll see it.
The hours crawled. The wind died. The silence pressed in, and his eyelids grew heavy. Around 3 a.m., his chin dropped. He jerked awake, heart thumping, but the case was untouched. He fought to stay alert, but exhaustion dragged him under. His head slipped sideways onto the cot, and he was gone. When light touched the tent, he snapped awake. The case was open. The rocks were rearranged.
It happened again, right in front of me, and I missed it.
He hadn't heard a sound. No footsteps, no clicking latches, just the void, and then the result. He sat motionless, staring at the neat new order, feeling something deeper than defeat. After 2 weeks of nightly changes, Alexander had 32 photographs. He spread them across the tent floor in chronological order. He began comparing not just positions but relationships, which rocks clustered, which were always apart. A hidden grammar began to surface.
It's not random shuffling. The same pairs keep recurring. This has structure.
He sketched a matrix in his waterproof notebook, marking which rocks appeared adjacent across the nights, a web of connections. A pair of sandstone samples from the Lisburn Formation never touched the Nanushuk Shale, unless a specific limestone separated them.
This order isn't by collection time. It's obeying an underlying principle, something the rocks shouldn't know.
He cross-referenced the photos with his collection log. The rules sharpened. The rocks were grouping by something other than location or date. Late that night, he pinned the clearest 6 photos to the tent fabric, tracing a finger along the invisible logic.
I am missing the key, but it's there. A deliberate, non-human intelligence at work.
The arrangement was too precise for chance, yet too alien to name. But it was waiting for him to decipher it. Alexander keyed the satellite phone to the weekly check-in frequency, his thumb hesitating over the transmit button. He gave his position and weather report. Then, as casual as he could, asked about any field equipment anomalies in the region.
Any reports of odd behavior? Instruments acting up? Things not staying where you put them?
The comms officer on the other end paused. Alexander could hear the static and someone shifting in a chair. The response was flat and dismissive. No anomalies, only standard gear failures. Then a pointed question. Was he having issues?
Don't say it. If I tell them I am the problem, I am the anomaly.
He forced a laugh, thanked them, and ended the call. The silence that followed was heavier than before. He set the phone on the table and stared at it. For the first time, the isolation felt like a cage.
If I am the only one seeing this, then it's either a lie or I am losing my mind. Neither helps.
He took the phone outside and turned it off. No more calls. Whatever was happening, he would face it alone. That night, alone with his photographs and the silence, Alexander cross-referenced the formation labels one by one. He pulled out his weathered USGS field guide and flipped to the regional stratigraphic column. The photo from that morning showed a Nanushuk Formation sandstone directly above a Jurassic limestone.
That's not random. That's the exact order they appear in the rock record. Youngest on top.
He traced the column with a trembling finger. Cretaceous, Jurassic, Triassic, each rock in its proper sequence.
They're arranging themselves by geological age. Every night, a perfect reverse chronology.
He pulled 3 more photos, each a different morning, and the pattern held without a single deviation.
This is impossible. These rocks can't know their own radiometric ages.
He opened his waterproof notebook and wrote a single, underlined question. How do they know? The case sat closed on the table. But now it carried a burden of impossible certainty. From his sample bag, he withdrew a Cretaceous sandstone and a Jurassic limestone, their relative ages unquestioned.
I'll place them arbitrarily. If the phenomenon is real, by morning the younger will be above the older.
He placed the Jurassic limestone on top, the Cretaceous sandstone beneath, a deliberately incorrect sequence, then photographed the case with the case latched and the camera stored. He forced himself to sleep, trusting the morning to bring an answer. At dawn, he unlatched the case with dry hands and raised the camera. The Cretaceous sandstone now rested neatly above the Jurassic limestone.
They corrected themselves. They know.
He photographed the new arrangement and compared it to the previous night's image. The reversal was absolute. In his notebook, he wrote the words he could now say aloud. Reverse stratigraphic order confirmed.
The impossible is real, and I am the only one who knows.
The next morning, Alexander spread the quadrangle map across the table and circled 4 formations with published absolute ages.
Cretaceous, Jurassic, Triassic, Permian. If the phenomenon is real, it will order them from youngest to oldest.
He spent 3 days traversing the scree slopes, locating each formation's precise outcrop. At each site, he selected a fresh sample and wrote the formation name and its known million-year age on the label. Nanushuk, 112 million years. Lisburn, 170 million years. Sadlerokit, 245 million years. Back at camp, he emptied the case and placed the 4 rocks in a deliberately mixed order. Permian on top, then Cretaceous, Jurassic, and Triassic.
This sequence is wrong. The absolute opposite of the geologic record. No rational process would reorder these.
He photographed the jumbled case, then latched it shut and laid the camera on the cot. Outside, the valley had gone windless, the kind of silence that made his own heartbeat feel intrusive.
If tomorrow they're arranged from youngest to oldest, I have to accept it. This isn't a mistake.
At dawn, he unlatched the case without hesitation. The Nanushuk sandstone sat perfectly on top, the Permian limestone at the bottom.
I placed them Permian on top. They reversed completely. Cretaceous, Jurassic, Triassic, Permian. Exactly correct.
He held the photo beside the regional column. Cretaceous above Jurassic, Triassic above Permian. The sequence was flawless.
112 million years above 170. These numbers were in the literature, not in the field.
He left the rocks as they were and closed the case. The next morning, the order held, unmoved, as if satisfied. In his notebook, beneath the earlier question, he wrote a statement of fact. The rocks know their absolute age.
This isn't geology. It's something the discipline has no language for.
He fanned the photographs across the table, each time stamped, each an evidence of the impossible.
Without radiometric dating by a lab, this is still just a field anomaly, but I know.
He locked the case, the latches cold and final. The mountain silence pressed against the tent like a held breath. For 2 days, he did not open the case. The photographs sat in a stack, and the silence in the tent thickened with each unspoken thought.
I could call the helicopter early. Bad weather, equipment failure, any excuse would be accepted.
But the season's data was incomplete. His conscience, as a scientist, would not let him leave the mapping unfinished.
If I run now, I'll never know whether an objective lab would confirm the impossible order. I need independent verification.
He unlatched the case and began transferring every sample into individual resealable bags, each marked with its original collection coordinates and stratum. He sealed them in exactly the order he had collected them, not the rearranged sequence, laying each bag in a transport box. When the box was full, he wrote a standard lab submission form, requesting radiometric dating. No mention of the anomaly.
The lab will provide the numbers. If they match the nightly order I documented, the evidence will be irrefutable, even to me.
He locked the transport box, then closed the field case for the last time. The photographs went into a waterproof pouch, separate. He would finish the remaining weeks, complete the survey, and carry the secret home to Anchorage. The weeks that followed became a grim repetition. Each morning, the field case presented a flawless new sequence, mocking every law he'd been taught.
It's taunting me. Every night, a different flawless order, Cretaceous above Permian, Triassic nestled between, just to prove it can.
He took the photographs on muscle memory alone. The ritual now carried no comfort, only the weight of relentless confirmation. At night, new sounds began to bleed through the tent fabric, soft clattering of rockfall from the scree slopes, yet without a breath of wind.
That's not natural. Rocks don't just slide down in still air. Something is moving out there.
He unzipped the flap and swept the headlamp across the black scree. The beam caught nothing but motionless stone, yet the silence felt crowded.
I am not alone. The rocks know I am here. Something in this valley has been waiting for a witness.
His sleep became fractured. He'd wake at 3 a.m. with the headlamp dead, its batteries drained, and the case open in the dark.
It's draining the batteries now, feeding on the light. It doesn't want to be seen, but it wants me to know it's here.
He kept the camera charged, the photos evidence of a reality he no longer trusted himself to recount. The feeling of being watched never lifted. The satellite phone buzzed with an urgent weather notification. A low-pressure front was sweeping toward the quadrangle, and the extraction window was closing. He knelt before the field case one last time. Inside, the rocks sat in their final arrangement, a perfect reverse chronology, as if mocking the storm.
One more photo. Then I leave this valley to whatever made it its own.
He transferred each sample into a labeled bag, strictly in collection order, then sealed the transport box with the evidence weighed and logged. The camp disintegrated under quick, methodical hands. The tent folded, the case emptied, all trace of his presence removed except the frozen ground. When the helicopter broke the skyline, he didn't wait. He shouldered the box and crossed the scree, the rotor wash drowning out the wind. He loaded the gear, pulled himself into the cabin, and fastened the harness. The pilot gave a curt nod, and the valley fell away beneath them.
I am leaving, but the silence is still with me. That valley, those rocks, they'll still be rearranging tonight.
In Anchorage, the transport box rested on the floor of his temporary office. The storm had followed him south, rattling the windows. He walked the box to the radiometric dating lab and submitted it with a standard form. The technician took it without question. The wait began. In the temporary office, the space where the transport box had sat became a constant reminder. The floor was empty, but the weight of waiting filled the room.
8 weeks, they said. I can survive 8 weeks.
He tried to bury himself in other field reports, but the phone on the corner of the desk drew his gaze like a magnet. The first week passed slowly, then the second. No call, no email. The lab's silence was a void that expanded daily.
No news is normal. Standard turnaround. Takes time. I've waited for data before.
He checked the lab's online portal every morning and evening, refreshing the status page until the ritual felt compulsive.
If the dates match, it's irrefutable. If they don't, I'll have to accept I imagined it all. Either way, there's no middle ground.
In the third week, an email notification lit up the phone. His heart slammed against his ribs. It was only a lab status update. By week 5, he was rereading his field notes at 2 a.m., second-guessing every observation, questioning his own sanity. The waiting hollowed him out. The answer, when it came, would either change everything or leave him alone with a secret no one would believe. On the morning of the 8th week, a single email notification lit up the phone. The subject line read simply, "Radiometric dating results."
No more waiting. This is it.
He opened the attachment with dry, clicking fingers. A spreadsheet appeared, columns of sample IDs and ages in million-year increments. He printed the sheet, then laid his field photographs beside it. He traced the first sample on the list, then found it in the photo. The age matched the position. Top of the case, youngest date. He went down the list. Cretaceous, Jurassic, Triassic, Permian, each date slotted into the exact reverse order sequence the case had displayed night after night.
There's no error. No coincidence. The rocks knew. The lab just proved it.
He sat back in his chair, the office suddenly too small. The evidence was irrefutable, a truth he could never unknow. The radiometric dates corresponded precisely to the order the rocks had been arranging themselves into during his field season. He had no way of knowing those dates in the field. He closed the laptop slowly. There was only one thing left to do: write the report. The agency had to know. He opened a new memo document and stared at the blank screen. The cursor blinked, waiting.
Stick to the facts. No speculation. Just what I observed and what the lab confirmed.
He typed a dry, chronological summary, sample collection methods, the first unexplained reorderings, the nightly photographic log, the experimental verification with known age formations, and the final radiometric dates. He attached the time-stamped photographs and the lab's spreadsheet, the evidence as cold as the rocks themselves.
This will trigger an investigation. The agency has to take it seriously.
He addressed it to Dr. Hayes, branch supervisor, and hovered the cursor over send. Then he clicked. The email disappeared into the agency server. He sat back, a strange relief loosening the knot in his chest.
It's out of my hands now. The data speaks for itself.
He believed the agency would respond with curiosity, that science would win over bureaucracy. He was wrong. Within 48 hours, a call came in. Dr. Hayes wanted to see him. Immediately, Alexander sat across from Dr. Hayes. The sealed file opened between them on the desk.
3 other geologists in that quadrangle reported the same thing, going back to 1968. Each was reassigned. You've read the file.
And if I refuse? If I push for an investigation?
There will be no investigation. The policy is fixed. Your career would end, and the agency would disavow your work.
The room fell into a long, suffocating silence. Alexander stared at the confidential stamp, the names of the reassigned geologists typed beneath.
So this is it. Surrender or destruction.
He closed the file. The latch clicked like a trap.
I'll take the rest in desk. You'll have my report retracted.
The memo is sealed with the file. Your photographs stay there. You'll review field reports, not produce them.
Alexander nodded once, a gesture that cost him more than he could measure. The meeting ended, and his fieldwork died in that chair. 4 years had passed. Alexander Reeves had become a desk geologist in Reston, reviewing field data he would never collect himself. His nameplate on the door read, Geologist, but the title felt borrowed, like someone else's coat. When the last colleague left and the hallway lights timed out, he unlocked the bottom drawer. He lifted out a worn envelope and slid the photographs free. The timestamps still brutal in their precision.
Cretaceous above Permian. The proof hasn't faded, neither has the weight.
He fanned them across the desk, the rocks in their impossible order, the secret intact. No one had ever seen them. He had kept that promise to Hayes, to the agency, to himself. He gathered the photographs, slipped them back into the envelope, and turned the key in the drawer. Outside, the Reston skyline was dark. Inside, the drawer stayed closed, and the quadrangle in northern Alaska continued its silent, nightly ordering, unwatched, unproven, unchanged. In Reston, the years passed quietly. Alexander Reeves sat at his desk, the map on the wall a graveyard of field seasons he would never repeat. Beneath the agency's corridors, in a sub-level archive, a single cardboard box waited on a shelf. A hand, not Alexander's, pulled a confidential folder from a cabinet, the red stamp still legible. Inside was a black and white photograph from 1968, a young geologist staring into the lens with the same haunted, knowing expression. The folder was laid into the box, joining 3 others, each with a different year. The box's label read, K-1, 2 to 1968, 2018. 4 names were typed beneath. The lid was closed. The metal clasp pressed down until it clicked. The box was pushed into a dark slot. The drawer slid shut. The archive room fell into absolute darkness, and 1,300 miles north, in a silent alpine basin, the rocks continued their nightly reordering, unwatched, unproven, unchanged.